was a lad, I was a little bit shy. Something came along, caught my eye. When I heard the jazz band strike up, swear I had my mind made up. Now I'm getting older, and everything is in full swing. Now I'm getting bolder, and boy, gotta do that thing. Used to walk alone with the rest, got something on my own. Oh baby, you got a little something, darling, you got a little something new, find a little something new. Broke away somehow, that's why I'm swinging it, got my own thing now. Children, put away your toys, all your little children's games. Let the jazz band make some noise. Step up, ladies, and watch out, boys. Mirror on the wall, who's a hot band in the hall? Let everybody sing, boy, you gotta do that thing. Used to walk alone with the rest, got something on my own. Oh, baby, you got a little something, darling, you got a little something new, got a little something new. Broke away so, everybody say so. So I'm swinging it, shoop up, shoop up, shoop up, shoop up, shoot up.
Hello and welcome once again to the Dr. Zero Free Magic Secrets Show, where we investigate all forms of magic from all over world history, all over the globe. And today we're going to talk a bit about initiation and what that means. There's, mystical initiation, and then there's, say, initiation to covens or groups or different grades of different magicians, ways of enhancing their ability towards ascent. So we're going to talk about initiation, and this is going to be coming from a book called Prime Chaos, Adventures in Chaos Magic by Phil Hine, last name Hine. Forward is by Grant Morrison, the comic book writer, and this came out on the original Falcon Press, which has put out a lot of good stuff. So Phil Hine has been associated with Chaos Magic a lot. He's put out a number of books. I guess he's in his own paradigm these days, but still appreciates Chaos Magic for what it is. Chaos Magic itself is a whole nother talk, but as far as this initiation that we're talking about, the parameters of it, it's universally held. So this works for pretty much everyone. So hopefully everybody will be able to get something very clear out of this. So to initiate something is to begin or embark upon a particular course of action. To be initiated in the magical sense of the word is to recognize that you are moving through a threshold of change, that you are in a period of transition. The key to understanding initiation is recognizing consciously what is happening, rather than simply wondering what the hell's going on. For many magicians and pagans, the recognition of moving into a period of initiation is marked by a ritual or magical retirement. Thus, in this context, an initiate is someone who is intensely aware of his or her condition and is surfing the crest of the wave rather than struggling to hold it back. Initiation is a time of letting go. It is a time of loosening up, when habits, beliefs, attitudes, and self-identification suddenly or gradually seem to be less concrete than they were previously. One's grip on normality may be temporarily lost, only to be eventually, one hopes, regained, but not quite the same as it was before. Dealing with this loss of certainty and the necessary confrontation with self can be difficult at times. Some never manage to go the distance and instead opt for fantasies wherein they are mighty adepts rather than simply accepting their own humanity, which necessitates a degree of humility, to say the least. Reacquaintance with self, then, is one of the core byproducts of initiation. Another is confidence, the confidence which springs from the ability to let go, to be able to lose control of something when you realize that control is no longer a valid option. The confidence to make mistakes freely and to be able to admit, I don't know, rather than fearing loss of face. The confidence of meeting an uncertain world head-on, smiling. Further, having gone through the painful process of shaking loose one's web of beliefs, values, and identifications, then other people's truths no longer seem as threatening to one's own. These factors and others contribute to one's own sense of poise, the easy, self-assured manner which is one of the hallmarks of the effective magician. What kind of time period are we talking here? That's difficult to say. As noted in Condensed Chaos, initiation is a process. It has its peaks, troughs, and plateaus. It highs, lows, and periods nothing much happens. One thing, sure, is that once is not enough. Initiatory trials come up time and time again as changes in our lives impact upon us. Change, the only constant in magic, is something that is mostly resisted, but occasionally is as stimulating as a shot of coke. One period of initiation doesn't mean you're now sorted for the rest of your life, but it is more likely to leave you understanding how little you understand. Initiatory cycles can take years to work themselves through. When you think it's all over, it usually isn't. Related to initiation is the idea of magical progress. It is often difficult for non-magicians to understand why those of us so afflicted are so passionate about what we do and what we get out of it, much less why we bother with it in the first place. One of the things that keeps us going is a sense of going somewhere or making progress in magic, to be on the path, to use an occult colloquialism. Colloquialism. You know what I mean, guys. This sense of progress does not come automatically to us. It is more that it sneaks up unawares until one begins to think of oneself as going somewhere definite as opposed to simply experimenting or messing around. Where one is going, of course, is up to each alone, depending on what they conceive progress to be. Something which is of itself is likely to change as one progresses and according to the company one keeps. Ideas of progress may also be shaped by any particular belief system or magical theory that one has chosen to give shape to experiences. Magical psychocosms, ways of structuring the universe and our place in it using symbolic structures, are often used as the basis of systems of initiation. That is to say, they are means by which magical progress is cut up into discrete steps, often known as magical grades. Each grade deals with a specific set of experiences and magical methods, allowing the individual to concentrate on one thing at a time, rather than floundering about. One of the arguments for systems of initiation, then, is that they give individual magicians a structure with which to approach their magical development and interpret and then assimilate their experiences according to a framework of theory and belief. That's the theory, anyway. How far one goes with any one system of initiation is again a matter of preference and changing needs. There are arguments that favor following systems set up by particular cult orders, teachers, or esoteric systems of belief, and those that say that creating one's own system gives the best results. Having done both, I will say that each approach has its pros and cons. Probably the best-known magical grades are those associated with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Neophyte, Zelator, Practicus, etc. Each grade had particular magical aims and objectives associated with it, as well as characteristic mystical experiences. The problem which has become identified with this kind of grading system is the way in which it lends itself to the creation of abusive hierarchical authority in a group, or ego inflation for solo magicians. Anyone can claim to have attained a particular magical grade, but in the long run this counts for very little unless other people recognize such an assertion and support it. It's pointless saying you're a magus if everyone else thinks you're a prat. So what, then, are initiation rituals about? Basically, there are two types of initiation ritual: self-initiation and initiation into or via a group. I will deal with the latter first. Initiation by a group. Initiation by a group has many shades. When individuals belonging to a particular magical tradition or system talk about rituals of initiation, It is usually in the context that the ritual serves to identify the candidate as a full member of that particular group, organization, or tradition, rather than a supplicant or novice. Thus, the ritual marks the end of that person's apprenticeship with the group in question. He is now fully accepted and recognized as equal to the others. This may be the primary consideration of the group, whereas stimulating or intensifying any intrapsychic change on the part of the candidate may be of secondary importance. This is not to say, however, that group initiation rituals cannot trigger periods of the personal initiatory cycle in people who undergo them. They can do so effectively, although a great deal depends on how the candidate is treated prior to the ritual event, during it, and afterwards. A rather extreme example of an initiation by a group was my own initiation into a Wiccan coven some 17 years or so ago. As is not unusual for Wiccan covens, I had to wait a year and a day before becoming initiated. This kind of trial period is often used in magical groups and orders at a time of the group getting to know the candidate and vice versa. During this period, a candidate may be required to undertake a basic magical training program or otherwise fulfill any entry requirements the group has. Most of all, though, it is a period where both group and individual strive to suss each other out, to find out whether or not the other is suitable in terms of personality, common beliefs, and values, etc. I was asked to keep a magical diary and to follow a regimen of meditation, yoga, banishing rituals, practice at divination, and to try and visit some natural setting, be it park, woodland, or seashore once a week. As I moved gradually towards the time of being ready for initiation into the coven proper, the leaders of the coven dropped quite a few hints about how my magical work would change after initiation. The ritual itself, I recall, with a mixture of awe and amusement. Amusing, as the coven had based it on a Golden Dawn initiation ritual, which called for more ritual officers than they had members, and the temple space was also rather cramped for the activities that the ritual called for. The feeling that I will never forget, however, is the moment of fear and uncertainty which rushed through my head as I was led, naked and blindfolded, into a room, and the first thing I came up against was a sharp magical dagger against my breast. And I thought, oh my God, what if I've misjudged these people and they are loonies after all? The realization that I had to abandon myself to trusting the people I'd given myself up to was an indescribable rush. The initiation ritual consisted of various symbolic recognitions that I was committing myself to the coven, the magical religious tradition of goddess veneration, into my own magical development. As part of this process, I was given a magical name by which I would be known during ritual and sacred events, and after the ritual had closed, was welcomed by the coven members with a party. However, the initiation wasn't over yet. A few days later, I was asked to visit the coven to discuss something. On arrival, the first thing I noticed was that the people there were distinctly cool towards me, not exhibiting the friendly warmth I had come to value so much from the coven. I listened with growing horror as the high priest of the coven explained to me that they'd made a mistake, that I wasn't suited for magical pursuits, and that if I continued, I would probably go mad. The initiation ritual, they said, was invalid. I couldn't be in the coven, and moreover, I should not do any more magical work. I was devastated by this revelation. I left Britain to travel around Israel and Egypt, and on my eventual return became interested in Zen meditation. I corresponded occasionally with some others who I'd met through the coven, but gave little thought to the occult practices and beliefs which previously had rather dominated my life. Nearly 2 years after my failed initiation, I received a letter out of the blue from the high priestess of the coven saying that she was pleased with my progress, and I would like to visit the coven again. I did so, and shortly thereafter was reinstated as an initiated member. On my return to the coven, I discovered that the rejection had been deliberate, that the trial of the initiation had not been the rite itself or being made to wait a year and a day for it, but to go through all that and then told that being a magician, which I decided I was going to devote my life to becoming back then, was not possible by someone I'd accepted as a trustworthy authority figure. Yes, I could have argued, blustered, or put up a fight. I couldn't have gone to another group as I didn't then know any other groups and had met a sum total of 5 other practicing magicians in my entire life. In retrospect, what the coven did was exactly what I needed at the time, and when I eventually came back to them, I had gained a good deal of perspective about magic and myself. I can only admire the way in which the Coven's act plunged me into an initiatory crisis and left me largely alone until I'd come through it. The element of the trial is a key feature of initiation rituals. In some tribal cultures, for example, the candidate is expected to endure pain without crying out, pain itself being, of course, a root into gnosis. In the Eleusinian Mysteries initiation, a celebrant prepared by fasting and hallucinogenics might be lowered into a cave complex where beast-masked priests enacted the parts of gods and spirits. In modern magical groups, a candidate's initiation trial might consist of being led and misdirected across a wilderness until he stumbles across the appointed spot for the climax of the rite. Being asked to defend a place or not to move from it despite all temptations of fear. Alternatively, the trial must involve the candidate's direct confrontation of a personal taboo or having to give up a major attachment. In Aleister Crowley's novel Moonchild, one of the protagonists undergoes an initiation ceremony wherein she surrenders her personal freedom in the belief she is helping another woman escape the order, who are made out to be cruel torturers. The test here is of selfless sacrifice. Another kind of trial is a ritual wherein the candidate is told to demonstrate his commitment to the group by choosing one of several courses of action, all of which involve varying degrees of subjugation to authority or unpleasantness. In this instance, the candidate's refusal to follow any of the choices laid before him, despite pressure, can be seen as a test of the candidate's individual spirit. Related to the element of the trial is the element of surprise in initiation rituals. There are different schools of thought here. One argument is that by using the same initiatory ritual structure for each candidate, the group builds up a layer of shared, common experience which helps build the sense of we-ness. A counter-argument, however, is that initiation rituals require an element of risk. If the candidate has only a few cues about what will happen during his initiatory ritual, he or she is much more likely to be in a state of heightened awareness, and it is therefore more likely that the ritual will impact upon the candidate at a deep level. For much of the same reason, it is held by advocates of this approach that initiatory rites should be carefully tailored to reflect the group's observation of each particular candidate. For example, it would be pointless to use quasi-S&M trappings in an initiation ritual if the individual it is aimed at is into S&M anyway. The sense of apprehension in a candidate for initiation can be gradually fostered through the pre-ritual behavior of the rest of the group. This can be heightened during the ritual itself by the use of blindfolds, earplugs, or other props designed to obscure sensory input, and again by the ritual officers distancing themselves from the candidate, addressing him in the third person, for example. Group initiation rituals may also involve elements whereby the candidate demonstrates personal commitment to the group and vice versa. Rituals are often closed with the other celebrants greeting the new initiate with a warmth and friendliness that previously may have been held back. Polite distance may be changed for joking, insults, arguments, and implication that the individual will no longer be expected to behave like a polite visitor in front of everyone else, but can expect to the joys of the full rough and tumble of group life. If a group initiation ritual is going to be successful in triggering a personal initiatory crisis for the candidate, there has to be, I feel, a bond of trust between the candidate and the group members responsible for orchestrating that person's initiation. The initiator needs to have formed some baseline ideas about how the candidate will perform under stress, and also to have observed the candidate long enough to have some ideas as to what for him will constitute a suitable ritual event. Also, the mere fact that for the candidate during a ritual, the initiator's change in demeanor from his or her normal behavior towards the candidate to one of ritual formality can act to increase apprehension and expectation. This bond of trust is particularly important after the ritual, especially if the ritual is aimed at triggering an initiatory crisis. Such personal initiation cycles are often marked by periods of depression, uncertainty, and varying degrees of neurosis. Getting through this period successfully is all the more likely if the individual concerned has a trustworthy person he or she can discuss feelings and perceptions with. preferably someone who has gone through the initiation crisis cycle often enough to help the initiate find his own way out. So we got to talk about self-initiation and where that goes. The process of self-initiation is central to magical development, and that the aspiring magician must, at some point, voluntarily open himself to initiatory crisis and, indeed, be prepared to engage in such initiatory trials time and time again. Several misunderstandings are circulating concerning self-initiation. One such is the idea that all self-initiation requires is undergoing a simple ritual of dedication to a particular tradition or belief system. Such rituals of dedication can act as statements of intent, as recognitions of one's entry into the initiatory cycle, or rites of closure once one feels that things have calmed down somewhat. Self-initiation, however, being a process of intense self-discovery and reappraisal, requires a great deal of hard work on the part of the individual and is unlikely to be sorted out after a half-hour ritual. Another misconception is that once one has passed through a particular initiatory trial, any changes of perception or insight that one may gain are fixed for eternity. During an initiatory crisis, one may experience both the lows, which are termed the dark night of the soul, and the highs of oneness with the universe, God, the Tao, the bliss of ego loss, and the intense feeling that one's accrued habits and limitations have fallen away. This is normal. It is also transitory. In my experience at the rate, I have found that a lot of it depends on what you do about any insights or new understandings that arise out of initiatory highs and lows. In other words, insights must be acted upon and understood gradually. Making small changes in thought, word, and deed is usually more effective than making big sweeping declarations. A further misconception around the issue of self-initiation is the idea, popular among some occultists, that self-initiation is somehow second-rate compared to initiation by a particular group. Related to this is the idea that one is not a proper magician, witch, or whatever, unless one is a member of a coven, magical order, or group. Of course, one can take this still further until it can be asserted that it is not a proper magician unless one is a member of X group. Some modern Wiccans, for example, seem particularly obsessed with proving lines of initiation back to a particular authority figure. Whilst this might well give rise to a certain sense of historical continuance, it's by no means essential. There seems to be some implication that by virtue of having a historical sense of continuance through being able to trace one's line of initiation gives credence and some kind of authentication to one's current magical practices and beliefs. But why should it? And why should this be necessary? I will admit that it's nice to be able to say, well, I was initiated by X and X by Y and Z by Y and Y by W, but it doesn't make what I do now somehow more valid than someone else who has merely initiated themselves working alone from books. All a group or teacher can do is perhaps no more than point in a particular direction or provide a helping hand along the way. In fact, I would argue that membership of a group can be the perfect setting for those who are unwilling to initiate themselves, preferring fantasies of being powerful magicians to the hard work of self-appraisal and self-acceptance. Steps towards self-initiation. How then does one proceed towards initiation? This, again, is somewhat amorphous. Many spend a lifetime seeking enlightenment, but get not so much as a glimpse. Many expend a great deal of energy being spiritually correct, only to find that the dull person next door is gifted with a remarkable vision of the all, in the midst of watching I Love Lucy or something seemingly equally banal. There is, I feel, an element of such elusiveness to the process of initiation, particularly one's first experience of personal crisis as a result of magical working. It is sometimes characterized by feelings that your occult studies or practices are not taking you anywhere, that the initial success that one is sometimes granted after a few months of occult working has suddenly dried up. There comes a desire to give up on everything, to abandon exercises and meditation, as nothing seems to be working. It may also be experienced as an existential crisis of belief and self-doubt. Fears of going mad are not uncommon either. It is not, on the whole, a very enjoyable time to go through. It is impossible to predict how and when initiatory crisis will explode upon us, other than in retrospect. It's impossible to generalize other than tentatively. Gradually, in my experience, one develops a sense of their onset, amplified through dream, intuition, and omen, but one has to be able to read one's personal signs correctly, which takes some experience. Some magicians believe that initiatory crises arrive as a byproduct of intense periods of magical workings and practices. Any kind of magical work, it is held, can lead to initiation, and by the same token, any particular magical project can be used, i.e. dedicated, to contribute to furthering one's initiation. Some magicians do construct magical retirements for themselves, which are aimed at uncovering some particular aspect of self through intense application of magical techniques. Examples of such retirements include the creation of a personal alphabet of desire, or identifying and binding one's own demon horde. Others may choose to pursue themselves through some form of psychotherapy or one of the myriad systems of self-discovery available. Indeed, Israel Regardie recommended that serious magical practice be prefaced by undergoing psychoanalysis, and this for a time was a requirement for a Golden Dawn style order that he was assisting. The various techniques and approaches which come under the broad umbrella of ego magic are also apposite for self-initiation. Certainly, intensely challenging one's own self-identifications, beliefs, values, and habits of thinking and action can provoke an intrapsychic crisis. But this has to be approached authentically, which is to say, not merely as an intellectual exercise. The initial aim, that of initiation, must be subsumed into the details of the practice itself, else one is forever on the lookout for one's initiation coming, whereas it is not apt to sneak up and bash you in the head until you've forgotten about it. Individuals who seek spiritual progress are often driven by a desire to achieve enlightenment, Buddhahood, mage's hood, whatever. Now, and there is a dash to find the most powerful techniques or methods which will guarantee success. Similarly, there is no one technique or practice that will guarantee a successful initiation. It is this amorphous nature of initiation which causes some magicians to argue that one needs a guide of some sort, be it a teacher, group, or merely friends with open minds, to successfully get through periods of initiation. Certainly, having someone you can discuss all your hopes, fears, suspicions, and occasional mad thoughts with is very helpful. Of course, those with various mandates and agendas of their own may see one person's vulnerability as an opportunity to sow their own brand of truth on fertile soil. Religious cults do this very well, hanging around colleges where they can draw in new students, away from the home and unsure of their newfound freedoms. When the world we have taken for granted suddenly fragments around us, truth can act as anchors against uncertainty. In such moments, the realization that nothing is true can be horrific or vastly amusing. So that is your lesson today about initiation here on the Dr. Zeero Free Magic Secret Show. So hit the subscribe button. Let people know I exist. Post these videos on social media. Do what you do. TikTok, that would be some help. All right, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Blah, 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 blah. Here's a rockin' outro just for you. Later.